The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a special edition of Wrestling Unwrapped. No, this is not Sean Garmer's voice you are hearing. I am Harry Broadhurst. I am your host tonight. My special guest is a member of the W2M Network. Who is it? What are we covering? You find out after this. Welcome to Wrestling Unwrapped, episode 23B.
Extreme Championship.
I'm kind of hoping he played Harry Flash in the Flash tones there. We can't hear the music. But if he did, that would be awesome. And if he didn't, well, then you're going to have to look up Team of Extreme yourself. Yeah, we're taking a trip back to the little promotion that could tonight on Wrestling Unwrapped. Once again, I'm Harry Broadhurst. My co-host this evening is not Patrick Kitsa. He is at Shimmer. He'll be back for Wrestling Unwrapped to the max next week as we cover that 6-hour monstrosity known as Survivor Series. My guest host tonight is Gary Vaughn. Gary, good evening, sir.
Hey, Guy, man, it's good to be with you tonight. I get to pretend I'm Patrick for a minute so I can, celebrate that my team won a championship in the last 108 years or something like that. So I get to celebrate in his shoes tonight.
Well, if everything goes according to plan in the NFL this year, you might be celebrating a title at some point in January or early February, I guess.
Yeah, too early to say, but, man, the way I feel right now, I can believe it.
Yeah, now just watch Jerry Jones screw it all up and put Romo back in once he's officially medically fully cleared. I'm calling it now. Jones is going to stick to Romo, and it's going to screw you guys. Calling it now.
Oh, man, don't do that. Come on. I rooted for your Buffalo Bills against those hated, Seattle Seahawks. You got to root for my boys for at least another game. Come on. Well,
we have Pittsburgh upcoming on our schedule, too, so you showed us how to beat them. Make sure they go for 2-point conversions and never get any of them.
True that. Oh, man.
Oh,
great to be with you, Harry.
You guys aren't here for football talk tonight. If you were, you'd be listening to Football to the Max coming up tomorrow night here on many of these same affiliates. This is Wrestling Unwrapped. We are a presentation of the W2M Network, available online at W2Mnet.com in association with 411 Mania Wrestling. What up, Larry? And we are sponsored by the Madhouse Toy Chest, stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. If you are a fan of anything wrestling, DVDs, action figures, VHS tapes, magazines, posters, you pretty much name it, he probably has it. Check out stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. Makes for perfect Christmas gifts this time of the year for the wrestling fan in your life. Remember, that's stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. So we're actually taking a look back at a very important show, and it probably makes sense to tell everybody what that show is. And since you selected it, I'm going to go ahead and let you be the one to tell everybody what we're covering tonight, Gary.
Yeah, we are going to do some ECW talk tonight, and I'm excited about it because, man, I have really personally never delved deep into the files, into those old VHS tapes that used to come out in a normal basis when you talk about ECW. And the one we're covering tonight is November to Remember, 1995. And I went all the way back then because there was a special part of this that I really wanted to know about. And I'll tell you when we get to that part tonight, but, man, I'm telling you, this is one I really wanted to see. And I thank you, Harry. Man, you gave me the opportunity and the reason to actually take the time to it. And this is going to be fun, man. I'm really excited about talking about it.
Yeah, this was a show that I originally watched probably about 3 or 4 years ago, but the difference between the two copies that we watched, I don't know what they actually put on the network because I didn't watch the network version. I have an actual convert of the original Pioneer VHS tape of this show with everything intact. So I don't know how much does and doesn't get taken out or added to the network version of it. My run time is 2 hours, 35 minutes, and 55 seconds.
Do you know what? That's exactly the clock time that I had as well. But, you know, when it comes to the network, they like to take all the nice music out and put terrible stock music in for entrances. And I'm sure they edited some things that, you know, I probably did not get the luxury of seeing that you did possibly. But, yeah, that was about the runtime that we had on the network. I take that back, Terry. Yeah, no, it was about 2.5 hours. I'm making sure. Yes, it is.
All right, well, then what do you say we get into the results here, and we'll see if all of the matches line up, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, this is ECW's November to Remember, November 18th, 1995, from the arena on the corner of Swanson and Rittner. And away we go. Conan pins the sexiest man alive, Jason Knight, with a crucifix bomb at 15 seconds. There's an explanation behind it. Just trust me, we'll get to it. There was an original match as well, but it doesn't actually start, so I don't count it. It's a couple of job guys. Broad Street Bully and Donnie Allen. Bubba Ray beats up both of them after stuttering. Is what it is. All right, anyways. Match number 2. Stevie Richards pins El Puerto Riqueño, better known to most wrestling fans as the Prodigy, Tom Marquez, at 2 minutes and 52 seconds with a Stevie kick. The Pitbulls defeat the Eliminators when... See, this is where I might have an issue here, because I can never tell the Pitbulls apart, so I always use the names rather than the Pitbull number. I have Durante pins Cronus after a super bomb. Was Durante 1 or 2? Do you remember?
I really do not remember how they actually announced that, personally.
I want to say that Durante was Pitbull number 1 or Pitbull number 2 because I think he's the one that challenged Shane Douglas at Barely Legal for the television title. I could be wrong there, though, so don't quote me on that one. All right, anyways. Rey Mysterio Jr. defeats Psychosis in a Mexican death match. It's basically a last man standing match, except you have to score a pinfall before the count starts. At 11 minutes and 46 seconds with a Rana off of the Eagle's Nest to the floor below. Too Cold Scorpio and the Sandman defeat the Public Enemy in 16 minutes and 1 second when the Sandman pins Johnny Grunge after accidental help from Rocco Rock. This match becomes relevant for a little bit later in the show because it means the Sandman is supposed to challenge Mikey Whipwreck for the ECW Heavyweight title. I say supposed to because, well, it's ECW. Bill Alfonso defeats Todd Gordon at 7:12 with help from Taz. That becomes relevant with what happens earlier in the show and what happens after. We'll get to that in a bit. Mikey Whipwreck retains the ECW Heavyweight title, pinning Stunning Steve Austin, yes, that guy, at 4 minutes and 40 seconds with a sunset flip. Sabu pins Hack Myers at 12:56 with the Atomic Arabian Facebuster. And you got to give me a second to look up the results on this one because I have this as an OPD because I have it on the McFoley set. Give me 1 second. Dang it, I went too far. The main event sees Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk defeat Mick Foley and Raven when Terry Funk pins Raven at 13 minutes and 35 seconds. It took me a second to look that up. I have it listed as on previous disc in my show review. It is available on Greatest Hits and Misses Mick Foley Set Disc 1 for those of you who might be interested in said things. So those are your results. I say we get right into it. There's a lot to cover. What do you say, Gary?
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right, this is time to take a trip in the Wayback Machine. Almost 21 years to the day. We are about 5 days away from that being accurate. And before I go any further, and we actually start the show, Viva la Raza.
There you go.
Just needed to be said today, especially today.
Yeah, for sure.
Is ECW's November to Remember, 1995. All right, so now that we've gone over the quick results here, I'm curious as to what segment you were saying caught your interest. I'm going to assume the beginning of the Sabu and Taz, or was it Whipwreck and Austin?
Had nothing to do with either. It was actually about Alfonso and Taz, and it was about Taz shooting on Paul Heyman a little bit there and the ECW, and that was the most exciting part because I've heard about this. I've never actually seen it. I've only heard Taz talk about it. And so that was the one segment in this entire show that I was really curious to hear. And, it was probably nothing that anybody else out there listening really cares about, but it's something when it comes to wrestling history that, once again, I've never seen. And so I was interested, and I really got what I wanted out of it. I really enjoyed it.
Well, actually, it is relevant to ECW's history because that is the birthplace right there, specifically with what we're going to start discussing here, because the opening match is cannon fodder. It's Bubba Ray beating up a couple of jobbers, annoying, as I mentioned, the Broad Street Bully and Donnie Allen. Bubba Ray goes to do the ring introductions, Michael Buffer style, and then goes, let's get ready to roll, and loses it and beats up both of them. So, there's the whole stuttering Bubba Ray gimmick. All right.
Yeah, but the one thing I do want to talk about before we run on past that, though, is I want to say this. I've seen Bubba Ray Dudley, in his older years. I've seen a little bit in his younger years. But I want to say this. In his youth, the man could get some really hard strikes. I mean, he did a great job selling those, punches and just, man, the violence that guy showed in that, I really appreciated. And, back in the day, if I was an ECW fan, Bubba Ray probably would have been one of my favorites because of that violence that he showed. Yeah, it was cheesy. Yeah, it was a squash. But at the same point, it was really impressive.
Well, Bubba Ray was one of those guys that was helping bring strong style to an American format because he was one of those big-handed heavy hitters. Him and Vaughn both had that going for them, and I think that's kind of what made the Dudley Boys stand out as much as they did in ECW. Even amongst all the other quote-unquote garbage tag teams in ECW, Bubba Ray and Vaughn would always tell a story, not to mention they would always keep the crowd so thoroughly invested in their matches, unlike teams like the Pitbulls. I mean, to an extent, like the Eliminators. Honestly, the crowd only really reacted for total elimination for the Eliminators, whereas the Dudleys kept the fans entertained in their matches from the opening bell all the way to the close. And a lot of that had to do with both the charisma and the in-ring ability of both guys, and Bubba on his own here specifically. All right, so you mentioned that you wanted to watch this for the Taz Shoot interview. Well, that's set up by what happens right now. As returning from a very, very lackluster run in WCW is the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal Sabu. Are you familiar with the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD?
I am not. No, I'm not.
All right. Well, there was a book that came out around the same time as well, which kind of went into a little bit more detail than the DVD did. And they talk about the fact that Sabu was supposed to come to an event back in either April or May of 1995. No-showed because he had a Japanese booking, and Heyman fired him on the spot. And it led to the crowd, after Heyman announced it, because Heyman operated into the philosophy that the crowd needs to know. He was worried about telling the crowd that Sabu wasn't going to be there, and was worried about how they were going to react. One lone voice, in the process of him making that announcement, yells out, Sabu. And the entire arena begins to chant it, thereby moving on from the company. However, he returns to a hero's welcome here, bringing us to part of what happens in our next match, and more specifically what happens in what you wanted to talk about. So let's talk about Taz's referee debut, shall we?
Yes.
Your thoughts on the way Sabu was handled real quick before we move on.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Your thoughts on the way Sabu was handled before we move on, like how you thought his return came off.
It really went really well, like you said, about the fact that, the crowd was really hot. They loved the fact that Sabu was going to be a part of this. And, it just shows how much of a legend he was amongst that crowd, amongst that company over time. And, just a really good debut. I mean, a re-debut, whatever you want to say. His return was, exciting. It was something that you could tell at that time period meant a lot to people. I've never been a big Sabu guy because I never followed ECW so much. And by watching this, I could kind of understand. I could kind of get behind the crowd a little bit. So it was really cool.
All right, so that takes us to the referee debut of Taz as he referees Jason Knight versus Conan. Conan was beginning the launch of the cruiserweights into ECW. He was starting to make that cruiserweight, that lucha libre style known in ECW. It would obviously be ripped off verbatim pretty much by WCW as we got into 1996. But in late 1995, this was the main place in America to see this kind of action. And Conan was getting an individual push away from the lucha libre style there as he was taking on Jason here. Taz came out as the referee for this match. Jason got in Taz's face, which led to Taz taking out Jason, and then that led to a crucifix bomb for the pinfall. The important thing to note of this match here is that Taz is now a sanctioned referee in ECW, and this becomes relevant later on in the show. This is exactly how I like my Conan matches, 15 seconds long.
Yeah, I don't blame you. But, I've followed Conan for quite a while as a big WCW fan. And I really never understood why people loved him so much. He was fine, he did, okay, getting the crowd apt and, the orderly, and all that. That was fine. But in this, I really had, no really care. And what was exciting, though, was to see that I didn't have to sit through an entire Conan match. I was so happy that Taz became a big factor in it.
I believe the story is that Conan was hurt and that they wanted to do something quick and simple here in order to get around Conan's injury. Honestly, whatever reason they needed in order to have Conan not have a match on this show was perfectly okay with me, so I'm not going to argue. Do we have anything to say about the Stevie Richards, El Puertorriqueño, Tom Marquez, Prodigy, whatever you want to call them, match? Like I said, 2 minutes and 50. It does become relevant for one thing. Stevie Richards makes a friend before the match.
Yes, he does. You're right about that. That is important. And, really, it's interesting to see that, Stevie Richards was not in control of the entire match. I really felt like coming into this, especially after that first match, that Stevie Richards was going to have pretty much another squash match. And at the beginning of it, they really made you feel like that, to be honest with you. I really kind of felt like, oh, here we go again. And sitting there watching this, I felt like, man, ECW is all about squashing people, aren't they? And then we get a little bit more offense from his opponent, and then basically it all ends up where it didn't matter. Stevie Richards was going to win anyway with that super kick, and nothing super spectacular, to be honest with you, from me. That was, decent, but I think this is another match that ECW either used to get the crowd behind some of the matches or just to get some of their fan favorites over. Besides that, it was nothing spectacular.
Well, Raven's not yet a thing in ECW because I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was still Johnny Polo, albeit briefly at this point in the WWF. Richards' role inside of ECW would pick up significantly once Raven made the transition. I could be wrong on that. I need to actually look into that and find out when Raven debuted in ECW, but I'm almost certain I want to say it was early 1996.
Okay, yeah, see, and I remember around that time period I was watching Raven, and I think you're right on that. And the important thing to me that is the fact that, you have Stevie Richards at part of that flock, which is kind of cool. I really, once again, I've never really studied ECW's version, with the flock and all of that. And Stevie Richards is a cool, cat at that time. He's young, he's athletic. To see the blue meanie, a part of this too, was hilarious. I love those little shirts that he had. That was comedy gold. I really enjoyed that. In fact, man, I would probably like to, actually own one of those shirts. And to see the blue meanie miss the moonsault as well in this, it's just something they really get the crowd laughing, I think. And the fact that, the blue meanie was a surprise, if I'm not wrong, Harry. From what I remember the commentators talking about here, the commentator, Joey Styles, talking about the fact that, this is a guy, who is this guy? Who don't know who he is? Who's the blue meanie? So is this the debut of Blue Meanie, or am I wrong on that?
It is the debut of Blue Meanie, and I am incorrect on Raven. Raven debuted in January of 95, not 96. He's just not on this show.
Oh, okay.
Because they were doing the Dreamer. Oh, wait, yes, he is. He's in the main event. What the hell am I talking about?
I thought you meant WCW. I thought you were talking WCW. Yes, he is in the main event. I was kind of curious about that. And he was, of course, Raven here.
I had a moment there. I'm sorry. Raven debuted in January of '95 in ECW, so obviously the flawless or the nest, as they were called in ECW, was in full effect.
Wow, Raven jumped ship from ECW, I'm guessing around 96, 97 over WCW?
Mid-97, because I believe he worked the WrestlePalooza pay-per-view against Dreamer where they had the chair shot heard around the world with Raven handcuffed to the cage, and then Raven debuted around one of the last Clash of the Champions, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Because I know there's a Clash of the Champions where Raven wrestles Steven Richards.
Okay. See, that's some history that I'd have to go back and look at. But I mean, besides, what we're getting into here is really what I'm seeing here is this match that we have with Stevie Richards coming in and getting the victory. It's just kind of a way, once again, to get Stevie Richards over, but it's also a good way to debut the Blue Meanie. And I think that they, honestly, going from that point of view, I don't think they did a bad job. The match didn't really mean anything, but that wasn't the purpose of the match I'm looking at here.
All right, so now that we've spent more time talking about this match than it actually ran, let's move on to an important match in the lore of the tag teams of ECW, as I actually did a little bit of research going into the show, although you wouldn't be able to tell it with that whole Raven thing that I just talked about. But let's move on from that, and let's talk about the fact that, if I am not mistaken, and according to one of the reviews that I read of the show, because I did a little bit of scouting around to see various people's thoughts and reviews on this show here, just to get kind of an idea and a reminder of what to expect going back into it here. This is the very first time the Eliminators and the Pitbulls meet one-on-one, or two-on-two, I guess, technically.
Huh, I did not know that.
As a you mentioned you were a WCW guy, so obviously you were familiar with Saturn.
Yes, very fun, man. I love seeing the guy with hair.
Did you have any familiarity at all with either Gary Wolf, Anthony Durante, the Pitbulls, or Saturn's tag team partner, John Cronus?
Cronus, I know a little bit. The Pitbulls, I had no history with those guys. I really don't know them very well.
All right. Yeah, honestly, the Pitbulls, Gary Wolf would stick around for a while after ECW closed. Durante would pass away early. I believe Wolf is deceased now as well, which is unfortunate. And that's one of the sad things looking back on a lot of these older ECW shows is that the death toll gets really high really quick. But Durante and Wolf never really would catch on anywhere else in regards to major professional wrestling organizations. Wolf would have a couple of appearances in early TNA, if I'm not mistaken, but that would be pretty much the extent of his run. Cronus wouldn't go anywhere after ECW except for XPW, and the less we talk about XPW, the better, frankly. Whereas Saturn would eventually have a successful run in WCW, like you were just talking about there, and in addition, he would have a somewhat successful run in the WWF as well. He would also be involved in the early days of TNA, too. Honestly, not really a whole lot to talk about in this match. It's pretty much one gigantic garbage brawl. I mean, it is what you'd expect from these teams.
Yeah, you're right. There's nothing really great here. I mean, I think it was a solid powerhouse kind of match. I mean, both teams went back and forth. Of course, inside, if you want to ask me watching this who I was rooting for, because I did not read up any results before I watched it. I never do. And as I watched it, I kind of root for Perry Saturn, of course, the Eliminators, of course, kind of the heel team here. And besides that, I mean, it was just a decent match. I liked some of the extracurriculars you had at the end here, where the manager Jason goes in there and steals a kiss. That was kind of funny, and to see all the action that ensues and the chaos afterwards. So, the match itself, blah, but the ending was kind of funny. I kind of enjoyed the chaos.
The main thing that I would point out here is, like you were mentioning there, I would say the most out of the 6 people at ringside for this match, I'd say probably the person that was the most over with the crowd was probably Francine. Mm-hmm. And realistically speaking, not that big of a surprise because she was always super popular in ECW terms.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. And, she was definitely over with the crowd and people loved her. And I believe, if I'm not wrong here, they were chanting "Please don't go" and things like that. I believe it may have been her they were chanting it to, if my memory serves me correct. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of funny to see that she was more over than the other talent.
There's a Jerry Lawler joke there that I'm just not going to make.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, let's not. All right. Finally, we actually hit the good stuff on this particular show here, and by good stuff, I mean really good stuff. The Mexican Death Match, which I'm almost certain it's on a WWE set. I just don't know which one. I want to say it's Biggest Little Man. It might be The Life of a Masked Man.
I'm not sure which one it was, and I don't know which one they handed him.
Why don't you go ahead and give your thoughts on this match real quick while I look that up?
All right, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, this match was actually spectacular. This is one of those matches where you kind of sit there and say, wow, this is an ECW, because, the history with ECW is just straight up violence, really matches that don't always include a lot of technique, and both the talents just really did that. They really put over the excitement with the wrestling, and Mysterio, I love seeing young Rey Mysterio. That was a lot of fun. I haven't really followed Mysterio's earlier career besides the WCW, and getting a chance to see Rey Mysterio in ECW, to see his youth. I believe Joey Styles had said he's 20 years old, I believe, in that match, and you could tell with the youth, the excitement. I mean, these guys battled all the way throughout the crowd. The finish, man, I love the finish of this match. It was so exciting. I mean, it was just one of those finishes that was, to me, the best of the night. So I was thrilled with it. I think both guys put on an excellent match, and it was really, honestly, my favorite match of the whole night because of all the athleticism and just, pure wrestling talent.
Yeah, it's weird to see what Rey Mysterio was capable of back when he still had both knees fully functioning,
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's sad to see what would become of Rey, although Rey would still end up having more than his fair share of excellent matches throughout his career from this point. By the way, I was incorrect. It is on Bloodsport, ECW's most violent matches, which makes zero sense because it wasn't all that bloody. But anyway. I guess they did brawl. I guess they did brawl all. They did brawl all through the ECW arena. So I guess I can kind of see that. But anyway,
it doesn't count for the blood. Yeah. Anyway, you're right. Let's move on.
But no, it's interesting to see what Rey Mysterio was capable of. As you said, you did mention that Mysterio was only 20, and as somebody that's read Jericho's books, you find out that Rey actually made his debut in a wrestling ring when he was 15. So this was only a couple of years into Rey's career, and this was before all the knee injuries that we would know that would slow Rey down, specifically the knee problems that he would have starting in WCW, and then obviously carrying over to his run in the WWE as well. But this Rey Mysterio and this Psychosis especially, I was more impressed by Psychosis in this match than I was by Rey because I knew what Rey was capable of. Psychosis was always one of those underrated guys in WCW who you never really got to see do a whole lot because they never really put a primal focus on him, and by the time that they did, it was towards the dying days of his run in WCW, and then he had that brief run in the WWE as part of the Mexicools as well, and there wasn't anything to write home about for that either.
Yeah, you're right about that. And, I didn't talk a lot about Psychosis because I get a little excited talking about young Rey, a guy that doesn't have any injuries. Man, I haven't seen that in forever. But Psychosis, you're exactly right. He was so impressive. I think that I love his violence, the aggressiveness of him. Honestly, the way he outsmarted Rey, a young guy, he took advantage of everything that this kid came in to try to use on him. So I just, once again, both these guys put full effort into it. So I think that's why this is probably one of my favorite of the night.
All right, we'll get more into our best and our worst matches a little bit later on there, but that takes us into our next contest here. And this is Stipulations Aplenty. It is for the ECW Tag Team titles as the current Tag Team Champions, Too Cold Scorpio and the Sandman, defend against the Public Enemy. In addition, Too Cold Scorpio, I believe, is also the television champion. And the winner of the fall of this match meets Mikey Whipwreck a little bit later on in the show for the opportunity at the heavyweight title. Do you think they put enough stipulations on this one match for you?
Jesus, man. What were they thinking? I get why you would do that, but that was just too much. It was a headache. I honestly, I didn't even know where I was going after they announced all of it. I just kind of said, who cares? Let's just, I just wanted to see what was going to happen in this match. And overall, it was a little silly when it comes to stipulations, but maybe I could understand.
All right. So then let's actually talk about the match here. Honestly, now as a WCW fan, how much of the Public Enemy's run did you get to see?
I really did not watch a lot of Public Enemy, and I remembered them, but it shows how important they were to me when I don't remember a lot about them in WCW.
All right. I recently finished watching Nitro 1996 on DVD. I have the full season of Nitro 96 on DVD, and Public Enemy makes the jump during 96. I think it's in March where they make the jump, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember there being a lot of excitement about their move to the WCW, as well as there being a couple of farewell matches against the either the Pitbulls or the Gangsters in ECW as well that I can recall off the top of my head there. So this was towards the end of the Public Enemy's run in ECW. This would be right after Sandman had dropped the heavyweight title to Mikey Whipwreck, and as I mentioned, Too Cold Scorpio, I do believe at the time was the television champion there. I don't think there was a question that Too Cold and Sandman was winning. The question to me was who was going to get the pinfall once they announced that the winner of the match was going to get the heavyweight title shot later in the show.
Yeah, that was the big thing to me, too. Going into this match, they pretty much spelled out to you that, you weren't going to have Public Enemy in ECW anymore. So what does that say? It's going to be the other two guys across the ring. And Too Cool Scorpio, honestly, was the guy I kind of thought was going to get the opportunity, only because he's young, he's a guy that's already a champion, and I figured they were going to, kind of build on that. And, that's not the way it worked out, and, hey, honestly, that's fine. But, yeah, I'm with you on, the fact that I kind of figured it was either of those two guys.
Your thoughts on the finish with Public Enemy going for the drive-by and Rock accidentally hitting Grudge, leading to Sandman getting the pinfall?
You know what? The pinfall was goofy as ever. And that, it works. It's fine if you like comedy. I'm a little bit surprised at how much comedy was involved in this show already. I mean, we haven't even got toward, the end of it. And I'm already telling you, there's already some spots that you kind of laugh at. And Sandman did a great job of being goofy and being knocked down and falling on for the pin. So it was fine, and it also works for later in the show. It's fine. It's goofy, but it worked, and that's what I was happy with. You even get to see some other comedy when they do the dance-off in the beginning before they even have the match, and that was kind of hilarious. You have a woman who was managing Sandman and Scorpio in this match. And so you get a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, she was Sandman's manager for the better part of his run in ECW before she made the jump to WCW to be with her then husband, Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah, it was actually a nice surprise to see her. I did not realize that she was a part of the promotion at this time, so I kind of found it a nice treat to get a chance to see her in this.
Which takes us to the next match on the show here, and specifically being where more of your storytelling comes into play rather than focus on the in-ring action. Because let's be honest here, when it comes to the in-ring action, nobody's looking to Bill Alfonso and Todd Gordon to deliver. This is all about storytelling, and this is one of those situations where, even though it's not technically sports entertainment, they never liked the sports entertainment name. This is ECW tying up all their storylines into one big sports entertainment finish.
Yep, you're exactly right. And that's what that's about. And, I was really kind of excited about watching this because of that reason. I knew it could be a train wreck. I knew it could be ridiculous. And it was, to an extent. Both these guys kind of corny. Both guys not having any really good, in-ring techniques. But at the end of the day, you get to see some of the funny spots with, the guys, hitting each other with a chair. The fist of cuffs they had involved were just kind of, outlandish. And the big thing for me here is I think Alfonso, and I'm not giving anything away for the end of the show, but Alfonso was probably one of the bigger heels in this whole entire show, and he did an excellent job. I'm not familiar with him, and knowing about him now, I kind of want to know more. But saying that, this guy did a great job playing the heel. I think that he did an excellent job of selling as well at times. I think even, you have Gordon there doing a decent job. I don't think he was as good as Alfonso in this match. But they get to be a bloody mess, and, we get to the end here, and I'll let you do the honors and tell them how this thing concludes.
Well, in regards to you wanting to see more Alfonso, there's honestly not a whole lot more Alfonso to see as a wrestler in ECW, because he was more of a manager, and he was more of like that annoying little twit referee that he had for the longest time in ECW as well, because he was one of the ones that helped portray the long storyline of Raven constantly screwing over Tommy Dreamer as an official. Whereas in this particular instance, he was, I want to say that this was part of during the talent rage by WCW, and the man on the inside was Alfonso. That might have been a little bit later on down the road in the company, but I know they're kind of teasing it here. Alfonso's more of a troubleshooting referee at this time. He does not wrestle a ton there. He's best known in ECW, honestly, as the manager of Rob Van Dam.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know that. And, I haven't really followed his career. And, the in-ring stuff is not as important as just the guy, the character, the heel that he is. I think he portrayed it well in this and impressed me just by being a heel. And, in-ring was, it was what it was. But I'm, kind of curious still to go even see him as a manager. And I will have to go back and watch some Rob Van Dam tape to see more.
Well, if you have the opportunity to pick up the One of a Kind DVD, I'd recommend that for a lot of his ECW, honestly, his early work. Most of the first disc for the One of a Kind DVD is his work in his early stuff in WCW, where he's Raw EV, and then making his way into ECW, and then doing the whole Mr. Monday Night thing during the ECW invasion of Raw back in 1997.
All right, I will. I'll have to check it out.
All right. So as you mentioned, it does take us to the finish of this match, and the finish does become relevant due to what happened earlier in the show. I kind of gave it away a little bit earlier. We'll go into specifics here. Referee gets taken out, which honestly kind of par for the course for ECW.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fonzie gets a frying pan. Todd Gordon hits him square in the nuts. I'm being told that I can... Never mind. Not going to make that joke again. We've made that joke many times on the show before. And then he hits Fonzie with the frying pan himself. But there's no referee. So out comes special referee Taz. And he proceeds to kick Todd Gordon's ass. Fonzie put on top, and that's your pinfall at 7-12. Your thoughts on the finish?
Yeah. And watching this, at first I was thinking to myself, what the heck is Taz doing? Why does Taz care? But at the end of the day, it's about screwing ECW, I feel. I mean, you have to tell me more of the history, but I think that's what this was about. You have a guy in Gordon who's, the commissioner who actually, matters in, when it comes to the company affairs. So seeing all this take place, I just think that, it's, once again, builds on Taz's frustration, his anger, and the fact that he's willing to do anything to screw ECW because they screwed him. So, him helping Alfonso makes plenty of sense here.
And this is actually the beginning of Team Taz as well, which would take us all the way from, because I do believe here, if my memory serves, this is also the beginning confrontation for Sabu and Taz too. And this is the first time that they would be in the same ring together. And it would set up all the way for a year and a half later at Barely Legal 1997, which we've actually covered before here on Wrestling Unwrapped.
Oh, wow. That's some brutal.
It would be a year and a half. April 12th, or is it the 13th? Let me check my list, and I can give you an exact date here. But it is, like I said, almost a year and a half, maybe 16 months, I think, before Sabu and Taz would actually have a one-on-one match, April 13th, 1997. So, yeah, almost 16 months to the day.
Wow. So that is really cool to see.
They would not have any physical interaction with each other until that match at Barely Legal. They would be constantly built up before they actually had to blow off at the first ECW pay-per-view.
Oh, that is great. See, that's the stuff you miss these days in wrestling. Those long periods of time before the guys even touch. And I love that. And, that's definitely something I wish in our modern day we had more of. But, I do want to mention before we move on to another match, we, didn't really get into this, but Beulah, was going to be inefficient in this match. And this is exactly why I loved Alfonso, was because he was willing to yell, scream, and, man, heck, he even, basically clotheslines Beulah, which, that's putting his hands on a woman, which, definitely is not a good thing. But, makes him just that much bigger of a heel. And, Beulah was looking good for everybody. And, I think they're all sad that she had to leave.
ECW was never one to mention moans about men putting their hands on women or women putting their hands on men. It was kind of like everybody's fair game in ECW. And I think at this time frame, in regards to the culture of professional wrestling, it was something that was more mainstream accepted rather than obviously with the whole men on women violence thing that the WWE has the outlaw on now, and that TNA tends to keep to a minimum, if at all, anymore. Where you only really see men on women violence in the independent scene these days, whether you have your various intergender matches or you have ringside managers interfering and getting taken out or whatever.
Yeah, you're correct. And, later on, and of course, wrestling history, you have someone in China who in WWE or WWF at the time, who it was more of a regular thing, but she was also an in-ring talent that was, a major part of the company. I don't know much about Beulah. All I know is that she married Tommy Dreamer. So.
Yeah. Beulah she would be around until probably around 97 when the Dudleys took her out, but she was a mainstay in ECW. She was actually brought in during the course of the Raven and Dreamer feud. Like, if you're interested in more of the ECW backstory, I can't recommend the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD enough. In my opinion, it's mandatory viewing for DVD fans, just because of the way that they go over all of the major timeline points in ECW. There's a couple of things that they kind of skimp out on, but I mean, they only have so much room for that kind of stuff. So,
awesome.
If you get the opportunity to do that, I'd highly suggest that you check out the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD in order to get more of a back history in regards to people like Beulah, who, as I mentioned, was brought in during the course of the Raven and Tommy Dreamer feud there. And it actually was involved in an incident that led to ECW getting thrown off the air on a lot of their television stations as well, with what is affectionately known in ECW parlance as the Kiss. And if you'd like more information about that, by all means, I'll talk to you about it after the show. If you fans want more information, we can have this discussion over on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Wrestling Unwrapped. Not an appropriate subject for all ages, so we will discuss it more through various means to not have to do it on air right now. All right.
For sure.
Heavyweight title time. Mikey Whipwreck versus the Sandman. Oh, wait, nope, never mind. So much for that. And you know what the thing about it is Sandman's entrance when Austin comes out and smacks him and he goes tumbling into the camera?
Yeah.
That would actually make the ECW opening package for years to come. That particular footage of, they wouldn't actually show Austin, but you'd see Sandman stumbling towards the camera after being hit from behind.
That's awesome. It was a good moment. I mean, I could see why they would want to use it as stock footage.
Now, as for the match itself, there's kind of an explanation for the shortness of this match here. Do you know what it is, or would you like me to enlighten?
I will let you enlighten.
As you know, Steve Austin was released from WCW while he was hurt. You knew that, right?
Yes, I know a little bit about this history, but I'll let you kind of enlighten just in case I miss something.
Do you know what injury it was that took him out of WCW?
I remember he tore his bicep, was put on the shelf, and basically Eric Bischoff said, "We don't need you anymore. You're fired."
That is exactly what happened. It was a torn bicep. That is why this match is so short as well, because Austin is not fully recovered from that torn bicep. But it was a way to get Austin onto the show. And Austin actually talks about this when he, on his, I want to say it is the bottom line on the most popular WWE Superstar of all time DVD. He actually says to Paul Heyman that one of the agreements for Austin coming into ECW was that he wanted to put Mikey over.
See, it's some information I did not know.
Austin talks about it on the actual bottom line on the most popular DVD there. And he talks about the fact that Austin came in and he did like the infamous promos and stuff, Monday Night Quill, I'm sure you're familiar with, because that's also on a couple of the Austin DVDs as well. And then the various Eric Bischoff ragging promos, the Hulk Hogan parody promos, another one that became widely popular for the work that he was doing. And it was those promos right there that got Austin noticed by Vince McMahon, is what led to him signing with the WWF in, I believe, early 96 and debuting as the Ringmaster a little bit later on in 1996.
Yes, you're right. And, I will say this. I mean, I could definitely understand where Vince McMahon would see a lot in this kid. The Steve Austin guy who has had some success, world-class wrestling, and, of course, hopping over to WCW, ECW, and his promo skills evolved. You saw it here. My favorite line was, and I can't remember, I'm not going to quote it, but I love when he looks at Mikey Whipwreck and says, "You better get out of the ring," or something like that. And then he says that he said that basically, "You're Eric Bischoff, and I'm going to kick your, whatever." So I thought that was kind of cool. I love that he threw in Eric Bischoff's name because we all know, that was a real situation.
I do remember. I remember in the build to the show, it was either the build to the show or it was like the show after, where Austin uses the infamous clothespin line on Woman as well, which, for the purposes of our audience here, I won't go into, but if you YouTube it, you will most certainly find. What are your thoughts on this particular match itself? Obviously really short, but kind of on purpose due to Austin's injury.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I love the fact that Austin was so aggressive, and, looking back at it, and the fact that you like what you're talking about, they had to kind of protect his injury. Austin still was very, aggressive. He still went out there and really punished Mikey Whipwreck, who, man, my co-host on the Wrestling to the Max podcast, we were having this discussion about this match in general, and Mikey Whipwreck sold so well, and throughout this entire match, you can just enjoy every minute because you think that Steve Austin just puts him, down to hell with all the crazy things that he did, like dropping him on the outside of the ring barriers and things like that, and just really punishing the kid. And, we get into the match, and actually Mikey Whipwreck makes the comeback here. And, it takes a roll-up pin for Mikey Whipwreck to win. And that says a lot. It says that Austin put him through it. It also tells the story that, no matter what, Mikey Whipwreck's going to find a way to keep his title. So I love that fact. I mean, it wasn't long. It didn't mean anything, I guess, when it comes to, best matches of all time or anything. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the story here, and I liked it.
Yeah, and the big thing here was that Mikey basically fluked his way into winning the title in the ladder match against the Sandman. I want to say that it was, I know the match is available on the WWE set, but I don't remember which one it is. But Mikey beats Sandman in a ladder match to win the title. And it's not one of those ladder matches where you climb up and retrieve the title. It's a pinfall match, which I always thought was weird. But so Mikey beats Sandman for the title, and if I'm not mistaken, I want to say this was one of Mikey's first title defenses. There weren't a ton of them, but this is one of the first ones. And he gets Austin here, and during Austin's brief layover in the company. Whipwreck was always sort of that guy that, as you said, never gave up, never surrendered, never quit on anybody. And it was a gimmick that, honestly, a lot of people really got behind at this time there, to the point that you would see him constantly take ass beating after ass beating, but still come back for more. Even going back to when he was teaming with Mick Foley, and especially going back to bringing back the team with Mick Foley towards the end of Foley's run in ECW, because a lot of people don't know this. Mikey Whipwreck was actually Mick Foley's last match in ECW.
Wow. That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Mick Foley would win the match, but Mikey Whipwreck was his last opponent. I sent you a link on your Facebook Messenger. It's the debut of Austin in the WWF. It's January of 1996, so Austin wasn't around for a whole lot longer after November to Remember.
All
right. Sabu, the character I've always found interesting. Sabu, the wrestler, not so much. And I have never been huge on Hack Myers, which leads to, well, a whole lot of nothing, and Sabu hitting the Atomic Arabian Face Buster to pick up the win at almost 13 minutes.
Yeah, match doesn't mean much. It's just all about Sabu. Really, that's what we got here. It's about showcasing Sabu and, you know, how great he is, why the fans love him, you know, how crazy the guy is, the violence that he's willing to put people through, to put himself through. That's what we got here at the end of the day. You know, Myers isn't impressive at all, but, you know, really, once again, it's about Sabu. So, you know, that's it.
Yeah, this was their way of reintroducing Sabu to the arena fan base and to their fan base at home as well. Because, as I mentioned in the preview for this show, there ECW got a lot of its publicity on word of mouth between the tape traders around this time. Because yes, kids, there were people that used to record videotapes and actually send them around to other people around the country. Legal? No, but it happened.
Yeah,
so that takes us to this match here, and again, Sabu's coming off of the interaction with Taz. Taz turning heel earlier in the show there. Sabu making his return there. Taz using Sabu's return is one of the reasons that he felt disrespected by ECW, which is all the more reason because it was supposed to be a match against Taz that Sabu no-showed for, or a match teaming with Taz, that Sabu no-showed for, which led to Sabu being fired in the first place. So Taz was obviously pissed off about that. Sabu was ready to get back into the fold in ECW after, as I mentioned, a lackluster run in WCW. And that brings us to where we're at here with Sabu getting the win over Hack Myers and sending us merrily on our way to our main event.
Yep, and you know, like I said, you know, this was a way to continue Sabu, and there you go. I mean, I think the crowd's excited. I think they're pumped after that, and leading into the main event, I think it kind of helped.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the most important parts of ECW here was crowd management, in that they had the ultra-popular Sabu, and then right before that they had their really popular heavyweight champion, Mikey Whipwreck, as your way to bounce back from Taz's heel turn earlier on in the show. And then that led us into this, I guess you could call it a death match. I mean, not so much in name, but honestly, ECW never really believed in stipulations as far as having disqualifications and that kind of stuff anyway.
Yeah, you could tell. You could definitely tell that the stipulations and all that kind of stuff, and the way that, you know, it was pretty much freelance. Do whatever you want to do. Just have a winner. That's the way they kind of did things.
All right, so 13 minutes and 35 seconds of them pretty much beating the snot out of each other with anything and everything that they could find, including various items found throughout the crowd and handed to Tommy Dreamer. A couple of things to mention here. One, this match reminded me of how glad I am that we've gotten away from significant headshots with weapons these days.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and it is amazing because, you know, like I said, it's been a while since I've seen these matches. And to see the headshots that they had, I was like, oh, geez, you know, now there would be no way they'd have already stopped the match a long time ago. And, yeah, I'm grateful that we no longer have that, only for the fact that I kind of want my wrestlers around for a while. And, yeah, a lot of these guys have lasted a long time after this. And, you know, Tommy Dreamer still mixes it up. And you still see Terry Funk here and there have, you know, shots. But, man, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they did years and years of those headshots, just like in this match. It's amazing.
Raven's still relatively involved in professional wrestling as well, even though it's not so much as a performer anymore, it's more in the backstage capacity. So, yeah, and obviously Foley still got his involvement in the WWE too, with him being the general manager on Raw these days. So all four men are still actively involved in pro wrestling. But when you watch stuff nowadays, and you go back and you rewatch shows like this, and you see like the VCR shot that Dreamer hit Raven with, where he pretty much threw the VCR at Raven's head.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Like 1995 me would be like, cool. Whereas 2016 me is like, why the hell?
Yeah. Well, it goes to the fact that we're more educated now with headshots, and we understand what happens to men and women who take these type of shots to the skull. And, it was a lot of fun back then because we were innocent. Now we actually have the knowledge, and it's terrifying. And, it's still kind of fun, and it's sick entertainment when you watch it because, you get to enjoy something you're not probably ever going to see again unless you get to some indie promotions who are, let's be honest, not so, credible when it comes to, the professional world. So I think, it was a nice treat, but it was also sick in a way and kind of sad.
And it's one of the things that turns off a lot of people in regards to ECW is that whole garbage wrestling style that they had with all the brawling and all the weapon shots and stuff, how it doesn't necessarily hold up here. The reason matches like this one hold up is more for the intensity there, and also due to the storytelling involved as well here. And one specific piece of storytelling that I want to discuss here is Mick Foley's shirt choices. Have you ever read any of Mick Foley's books?
I have only read Mick Foley's first book, and I have not read the other ones.
All right, well, it is in his first book that he talks about what happens in this very match, so it works out that you've read that. This match is the debut of the infamous Forgive Me, Uncle Eric shirt.
Yes, you're exactly right, and it's kind of interesting to read about it and to kind of actually get to see it. You're right.
Yeah, it's something that, another reason that I think that this match is included on that Mick Foley Greatest Hits and Misses DVD is because of this right here, because he spends a good amount of time in his first book talking about his feud with Tommy Dreamer in ECW and the fact that he wanted to save Tommy Dreamer from exactly what we were talking about, the hardcore ways of ECW. He wanted to send Tommy to WCW, at least that was the story, that he wanted to send Tommy to WCW in order to help preserve Tommy Dreamer's career. And because he realized the mistakes that he made while he was with WCW, and now that he's working for ECW, and he didn't want Dreamer to make the same mistakes that he did. And it's honestly an excellent bit of storytelling, and it leads to some of Mick Foley's best promos of his career.
No, for sure. I totally agree. And, like I said, it's really interesting to read about this and to kind of know it and then to watch it actually take place and to see, how this is actually, unfolding. So I definitely appreciate that, history.
All right, let's talk about the finish here, where Tommy Dreamer has Raven down after a pair of DDTs and a pile driver, but he gets distracted by Mick Foley, and it leads to Terry Funk piling on for the pinfall as well. Are you aware of the whole history with Raven and Dreamer as far as the fact that Dreamer never pinned Raven until what was originally Raven's last match in ECW?
No, I was not aware of that, because, like I said, I'm not a big ECW guy, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, it was one of those times where Dreamer actually had Raven down in order to, he had Raven down and in a position where he could be pinned there, but allowed himself to be distracted by his ongoing feud with Mick Foley as well. Excuse me, got a case of the hiccups now. And then that's what led to Terry Funk picking up the win here. Raven would be ECW champion before the end of the year as well, if I'm not mistaken. Or if not before the end of the year, then definitely early into 2016.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting to know going in kind of leading from this point.
Early into 1996, not 2016. I had a moment there. All right. Before we get into our overall thoughts here, I want to get as a relative newcomer to ECW here. I want to get your thoughts on who you think stood out most as far as ECW characters, and not so much people that you heard of going into the show, such as your Rey Mysterios, your Dreamers, your Ravens, your Sabus, and Austins and stuff. But you mentioned Bill Alfonso. Was there anybody else who you were just originally seeing now on this show that really stood out to you?
You know what? It's kind of interesting because, Alfonso is a big guy coming out of this, and I was really curious to know some of his history and seeing him. I followed Psychosis a little bit in WCW, but it was fun to see him here. Really kind of thinking about it going in, from this, I really looked at, the vast amount of characters that I didn't have a big history with, but I kind of wanted to know more about, who the Eliminators were because of their characters and the fact that their manager, Jason, was a slime ball, and I wanted to know more about it. So those are, a few, but I mean, I think the Eliminators were a couple that I just wanted to get some more history on and know more about.
I can understand that, especially with you being as familiar with Saturn as you were there. Cronus was actually one of those guys who, despite his build and his athleticism, his personality, who he was, is kind of what held him back there. Because when Saturn jumped to WCW, if I'm not mistaken, Cronus got injured right after that, and then he came back and reformed a tag team with New Jack because Mustafa Saeed was gone and they were the Gangstinators. But outside of the run in ECW, we really didn't get a whole lot from Cronus in any of the other major organizations. And the thought process that I had is I've heard stories. I can neither confirm nor deny them, so I'm not going to share. Let's just say the ECW locker room was not necessarily the most wellness policied, and we'll leave it at that.
Oh, I see where you're going here. Okay.
So my guess is that there were other addictions of which Cronus had that caused him to not get as far as he probably could have. And seeing the state of mind that he was in when he worked in XPW, I could totally see that being legitimate. By the way, a quick Wikipedia check tells me that Mikey Whipwreck does win the title in a ladder match from the Sandman.
Okay.
The Sandman wins the title back on December 9th, 1995, and then drops it to Raven on January 27th, 1996. So I was correct. Early in 96 is when Raven wins his first ECW title.
Ah, fair enough. And, and you mentioned Mikey Whipwreck. That's another guy that stands out to me coming out of this. The match, once again, was nothing out of this world. But he's another guy that is featured here that I appreciate, that I would honestly like to see, if not a DVD, but more information about him. And, looking at that as well, I mean, there's some other talent, too, in this whole roster that I probably would look up. But, Mikey Whipwreck's a big deal to ECW, and I kind of want to know why.
Mikey was that underdog who could, which kind of led to him being as infamous in ECW lore as he was. He is also an ECW Triple Crown champion. Heavyweight, television, and tag team titles. He held all three.
Oh, I see. Man, that's kind of crazy to think about. And something else I noticed, Shane Douglas was not a part of this show. I don't know if he was out of the company or if he was injured. And then, of course, 911 was another guy you saw that really, I'll be honest with you, 911 was a guy that I kind of know about, so I kind of have a little bit of sour taste. So.
The fact that 911 wasn't involved in the show left a sour taste?
Well, just the fact that we saw a video package with him, and I was kind of a sour taste on him. So I should have said I was kind of happy he was not a part of the show. But Shane Douglas was a bummer for me because I really would have liked to see Shane Douglas.
The very next show here, to continue our ECW timeline, and I don't think this is on the network, is ECW's December to Dismember 1995, which means that pay-per-view did exist before the WWE's Catastrophe version.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so the WWE, altered that history, huh?
Well, it did exist before the WWE. And it doesn't look like there's a Shane Douglas match on this show either. There isn't. Dances with Dudley and Dudley over the Bad Crew. Taz beat El Puerto Riqueño. Hack Myers over Bruzo Mastino. The Eliminators beat the Pitbulls. Raven beat Dreamer. JT Smith beat Tony Stetson. The Sandman wins that three-way I mentioned for the heavyweight title. Public Enemy defeat the Heavenly Bodies, and then that turns into a 10-man tag where Public Enemy, Pitbulls, and Dreamer defeat the Heavenly Bodies, the Eliminators, and Raven. And then Ultimate Jeopardy still case match.
Huh. Well, you never know. Maybe Shane Douglas is on vacation.
Actually, if memory serves, wouldn't he have been Dean Douglas around this time?
You may be right. I think I remember in the video package, though, they used the word or the name Shane Douglas, but I could be wrong. I'm not the expert.
In 1990, this is directly from Shane Douglas's Wikipedia page. In 1995, hold on, I gotta find it. because I just had it and then I actually clicked on the link in order to go to the full. Douglas returned to the WWF with a college dean character as Dean Douglas. To establish himself, he filmed several vignettes with a chalkboard lecturing fans and wrestlers. He was set to wrestle Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship at In Your House 4 on October 22nd, 1995, but Michaels forfeited the title due to injury after being attacked and beaten by a group of U.S. Marines. Douglas had to immediately defend the title against Razor Ramon, which he would lose. That match is available on History of the IC title, if I'm not mistaken. His last appearance on the WWF television was at In Your House number 5 in December of 1995, which answers my question. Yes, he was Dean Douglas at this time.
Okay, fair enough.
Returned to ECW at House Party in January of 1996. Which, if I'm not mistaken, is the show that Raven beat Sandman for the heavyweight title. So another one of those important shows in ECW lore.
Well, very interesting.
All right. I do believe that puts a nice little bow on this one, don't you think?
I think so. I think we did a pretty good job here.
House Party 1996 is not where... House Party 1996 is not where Raven beat Sandman. It's the following January show. This particular one, Sandman successfully defends the ECW heavyweight title against Conan. Although, interestingly, early in the show, Rey Mysterio Jr. teams with 911.
Oh, boy. I bet that was a barn burner.
So now I kind of want to see that. I can't lie. I kind of want to see that. I might have to start looking for House Party 1996. All right. Let's go into the big finish, shall we?
All right, let's do it.
All right. The big finish, for those of you new to the show, listening on behalf of Gary, because Gary brings in listeners. Because if you were listening for me, you'd have done stop listening by now. But the big finish for us here on Wrestling Unwrapped is where we give our best and our worst match, our cash and our trash, which is our favorite match and moment, or least favorite match and moment. Basically, we define cash and trash as cash is something that you would put in a wrestling vault in order for fans to see for years to come. Trash is something that you would get rid of altogether from the show because it adds absolutely nothing to the show.
Okay, fair enough.
And then the last thing that we do is we give the show an overall rating. Let's start with our best and our worst match, and I'll let you start with your best match because you've kind of already answered this question.
I did, and, Psychosis and Rey Mysterio were a lot of fun to watch in this show. They were guys that, honestly had a match that I think, outside of some of the violence, maybe blood, which was not a lot, could be played in front of an audience now, and they would really, really enjoy, and they honestly probably would not know it was from ECW. So now, am I saying that because I'm making a knock on ECW? Totally not. I do enjoy ECW. I'm just saying it from the match perspective, the entertainment factor, the fact that both these guys just did such a great job. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, from start to finish, compared to some of the other matches that really weren't all about just pure wrestling. So that's probably my favorite one of the night. That's definitely my cash match.
Well, cash is a little bit different because we usually tend not to focus on matches in regards to cash and trash. I mean, you can if you want to, but we generally tend not to focus on matches in cash. Like, so for example here, something that you talked about earlier in the show would be a perfect example for your cash, and that would be Taz's promo.
There you go. You're right. You're exactly right. And that is the cash moment for me when it comes to just talking segments or a segment that is not about anything else. I think when it comes to trash, even though I kind of made some light remarks about it, I would go into talking about the Bubba Ray Dudley thing because it was kind of silly. But I definitely cash on the Taz promo. That was awesome.
All right. How about your least favorite match? What was your worst match on the evening?
And we're not going to count the match with Bubba Ray, right? We're not going to count that one part of this because if we are, then that one.
No, that match never officially started.
Okay, then it's got to be for me the silliest match. I'm just trying to think back of which one I want to say that's the worst, and I may have to say that the second match in this whole thing, and I'm already blanking on the young man's name that goes with the flock here. You have to refresh my memory. I'm already blanking here. I just didn't.
Are you referring to Stevie or
Stevie? Yeah, Stevie. It was just there was nothing that really enthralled me in it. I mean, it just really personally it was okay, but it was more about the goofiness and silliness, and I probably could have done without it.
All right, for me, the best match on the show was actually Bill Alfonso and Todd Gordon. The reason I say that is because it was an opportunity for ECW to combine all of its elements into one major component, which allowed for a large bit of storytelling as well as a large bit of action to occur as well between two non-wrestlers. The main thing that you have to focus here is what happens with the finish, because the finish has become relevant for many months to come down the road in ECW, but we don't get to that finish if Alfonso and Gordon don't put in the work to get us there. So I'm going to give credit to Alfonso and Gordon there, and in my opinion, that's the best match because of everything that it all combines into it. My least favorite match, I'm going to agree with you here on, and I'm going to say Steven Richards up Puerto Riqueño. And the reason I don't give this to Jason Knight and Conan is because if they'd have given Conan 3 minutes, it would have been my least favorite match. But they kept Conan to 15 seconds, so I can't complain too much. But in all seriousness here, this was nothing but a comedy match here, and at a time where with Raven being involved in the main event and Richards being a part of Raven's flock and Meanie becoming kind of Richards' follower here, I think he needed to do more to make Steven Richards look like a credible threat going forward, especially given that Richards himself would end up getting a main event run in ECW as well. This was not exactly the way to establish him as a guy that ECW fans should be paying attention to.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree with you.
My cash for the evening is the storytelling involved with Sabu's return, Taz's turn, and the way that we begin the road to Barely Legal here. Now, obviously, there are quite a lot of pitfalls on the way there, and there's a whole them teaming up and winning the tag team titles together because, tag team partners who hate each other is hilarious. Just ask Vince Russo. But at the same time, ECW was one of those promotions that, despite the fact that they didn't have the budget of the other two major companies, they thrived on their ability to keep people invested due to their storytelling. And this was a prime example here. It's, like I said earlier, it was 16 months, almost to the day, from Sabu's return to ECW to when Sabu and Taz finally hooked it up at Barely Legal in 1997. My trash for this show here is, and I really hate to do this because I'm a huge fan of the guy here, it has to be that heavyweight title match. This is supposed to be your biggest show of the year. This is your super show for ECW. This is November to remember. I mentioned in the preview for this show that this is the only... talking too fast. This is the only pay-per-view that would exist every year of ECW on pay-per-view. 1997, 1998, 1999, 2000. ECW was done on pay-per-view before 2001's November, so you can't count it against them. The heavyweight title match at your grand pay-per-view of the year, or in this particular instance, your grand super show of the year, needs to be longer than 4 minutes and 40 seconds. If you wanted to do like a little thing with Whipwreck taking on Austin after he defends the title against somebody, like let's say you have Too Cold Scorpio win that, get the pinfall in that tag match there. You have Scorpio come out and wrestle Mikey. Mikey squeaks out a win against Scorpio. And then you have Austin come down and lay out a challenge to Mikey, and Mikey beats him too. A, you put Mikey over huge. B, you give the fans a worthwhile main event for your heavyweight title match. And C, you establish Austin as this opportunistic dick who's trying to do anything he can to win the title despite everybody up down in Atlanta who felt that he wasn't worthy of that moment. They would have all made perfect sense. But instead, knowing Austin has the bum tricep going into that match, you still go ahead with Austin versus Whipwreck and then only go about 5 minutes with the title match at the biggest show of the year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's really, I like the thought process there.
All right, that takes us to the last thing we have to do for this particular episode. And that is where we give our final rating on a scale of 1 to 10 here. As the guest, I will allow you to go first.
Okay, well, looking at this entire show, I had a lot of moments where I really enjoyed it. I had some comedy moments, some special times, like I mentioned earlier in the show, the Blue Meanie had some comedy there. Not a big fan of the match, but, I enjoyed some of that comedy. One of my other favorite moments I haven't mentioned yet was when Jason gets in the ring and in a half-heartedly way he tries to, maybe talk Rey Mysterio into being his little guy. And Rey Mysterio took a lot of offense to it, which was funny, and really enjoyed that, as well as some of these other matches. But, saying all that, let's be honest. There were a few really good matches possibly if you want to really get into it, and one of those would even have to include Sabu pretty much doing whatever he wanted to Myers. Other than that, some of this was just not great, and some of it did allude to some of the ECW garbage wrestling stuff that really was not over spectacular. Even Mikey Whipwreck, as well as he sold, nothing just that really blew you out of the water. I'm going to have to give this one a 6. Still enjoyed the show, really thought it was fun, but at the end of the day, nothing that really sent me home thinking, man, I've got to watch that 3 more times.
Yeah, ECW's fan base was all about their infatuation with the product and the storytelling. To somebody who's not familiar with the storytelling and the product at hand, it's not going to stick up as much to a long term as it would to somebody who was emotionally invested in the product. I will say this. I used to wait up until 2 a.m. in the morning on Saturdays to watch ECW's hardcore television. Not the ECW and TNN show, but the actual syndicated show that they used to have. It would air at 2 a.m. Eastern Time on Fox 17 in my city, and I would stay up and watch it because it would be on right after the old USWA. That being said, though, I also don't consider myself to be one of those mutant ECW fans that praises everything that the company did, its greatness, because let's be honest, a lot of what ECW did was garbage wrestling, was crap wrestling. I take you back to matches like the Eliminators versus the Pitbulls. I take you back to the Public Enemy in general, really, to anything involving the gangsters. There's a way to do garbage wrestling and make it entertaining. That's what Psychosis and Rey Mysterio did. And then there's a way to do garbage wrestling and make it not entertaining. And that's kind of what happened with the Eliminators and the Pitbulls tonight. And that's kind of the recurring theme of the Public Enemy in ECW. There is enough good on this show, though, to outweigh the bad, in my opinion. The Psychosis and Rey Mysterio match is one of those matches that if you are a fan of Lucha Libre Wrestling, it's a must-see. The opening to Too Cold Scorpio and Sandman against the Public Enemy is hilarious. Seeing Sandman get down with his drunken self is funny on all levels.
I can ask you, what song did they actually use when you watched it on your actual DVD? What music did they actually play for the dance-off?
Jungle Boogie, Too Cold Scorpio thing.
That's awesome. Okay, see, I missed that. Watching it on the network, screw that up for me.
Bill Alfonso and Todd Gordon is everything entertaining crap that ECW is in one gigantic nutshell. Because it was the opportunity to combine a bunch of storylines into one and still have a relevant payoff. And that relevant payoff ended up being one of the most important things to happen in ECW with Taz's heel turn. Whipwreck in Austin was okay for what it was. I made my opinion of this match known in the fact that I don't think it should have been the heavyweight title match by itself. As a secondary title match, I'd have been okay with it. We've kind of had our discussion on Sabu and Hack Myers. My opinion on Sabu remains the same. Entertaining character, not a huge fan of the wrestler. And then the main event was really good, too, because it was that, as we mentioned with Psychosis and Rey Mysterio, it was that violent, that garbage wrestling done right, though. Because there was a lot of intensity, there was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of backstory into this match. You had a reason to care about why these four men were fighting. And in my opinion, between the two matches that were really good and you had that emotional investment in, and then the one match that, okay, wasn't as good, but you still had just as an important emotional investment in, I'm going to go ahead and give ECW's November to Remember 1995 a 7. Let's put it this way, Gary. There are worse ways to spend 2.5 hours on the network these days.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And once again, I was pleasantly surprised.
Watching that crap fest that is Swerved is one of them.
Jeez, dude. I can't even handle that. You're right.
I got like 3 minutes into the first episode and it's like, nope, not for me.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and there's a few other shows on there. I mean, there is good stuff on there, like Table for Three, some other interesting shows, but yeah, Swerve is not one of their best efforts.
And I do believe that's going to do it for us. Why don't you go ahead and toss out some shout-outs, put some of your own personal work as well here on the W2M Network as well as elsewhere?
All right, yeah, definitely. If you want to hear more of me, you can go check me out on the W2M Network. You just go find Wrestling to the Max. That is myself, Sean Garmer, and Paul Lees are all talking wrestling every week. We have 2 episodes, one that will be on the download for you on Tuesday morning and the other on Friday morning. We talk not only WWE, we talk TNA, we talk Lucha Underground as well as NXT, just everything pretty much under the sun, including Japanese wrestling when it comes to New Japan, and sometimes Noah and other products. So, yeah, we have a lot of fun over there talking those subjects. You can also check me on another show. It's called Football to the Max, and I, as well as Sean Garmer and Randy Isabel, do a football show where we cover everything in college and the NFL. So those are some, shows that I'm a part of and definitely proud of it.
Our producer, Sean, is, as he mentioned, one of his co-hosts on Wrestling to the Max. In addition, Sean's also involved with Football to the Max, too. And you can listen to Sean on Video Games to the Max as well here on the W2M Networks. Myself and Patrick will be back at you in 2 weeks. And we actually have a very interesting show lined up for everybody. It is the debut of an independent promotion known as Pro Wrestling Revolver. The interesting part of this is our first ever sponsored review, but as we talked about in our show last week, we have permission to give our actual feelings on this show rather than sugarcoating anything, because I wasn't going to do this show unless we could give our actual feelings on it. So you will hear myself and Patrick's thoughts on that in 2 weeks here, November 27th here on Wrestling Unwrapped. Myself, Patrick, Gary, Sean, and Paul will hopefully all be with you next Sunday night as the WWE presents the 30th edition of the Survivor Series. And we join you for Wrestling Unwrapped to the Max after Survivor Series. Wrestling Unwrapped is brought to you by the Madhouse Toy Chest. Stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. If you are a fan of anything wrestling, DVDs, action figures, VHS tapes, magazines, posters, you can get it inside the Madhouse Toy Chest. Mention that you heard this advertisement here on Wrestling Unwrapped, and the owner of the Toy Chest, Jason, will include a special gift with your order. For Gary Vaughn, our producer, Sean Garmer, I'm Harry Broadhurst. This has been Wrestling Unwrapped, episode 23B, Sean, a presentation of the W2M Network in association with 401 Mania Wrestling. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next weekend for Wrestling Unwrapped to the Max.
The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.